Welcome to Modern Mind, Ancient Book. We are going back to move forward. We're finding a love for the law, the prophets and the writings. We are becoming radically ordinary. If you'd like to contact us, please reach out by email at modernmindancientbook@gmail.com. My name's Roger. I'll be your host. We've got Pete here today. Pete, how are you tonight?
Good evening. Doing well.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
And we've got Nick present. Nick, how you doing?
Very glad to be here. Can't beat that intro. Ready to jump into this.
Let's get into this. We're going to do the book of Chronicles, which is not in chronological order, oddly.
Isn't it ironic? Yeah.
So, the book of Chronicles for Jewish people is actually the capstone of the Bible. It ends on a note, right? It ends on a, but there's more.
Right.
And so, you know, for us, it's actually 100 years after the next book we're going to do. But the fact is Chronicles, the story, the idea for who Israel is supposed to be really starts prior to being released and going back and building the temple, and then builds through that process.
Right.
And so this is another focal point, another turning point in the history of Israel.
Right.
So the book of Chronicles is, it's absolutely profoundly important. And yeah, we're doing it 100 years earlier than chronological order, but the fact is the book was being built during that time. So that's why we're doing it in that order. Okay. So
And just as a side note, in modern Bibles, it's First and Second Chronicles, but it's all one book.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just split up because of the size.
Yeah.
And for those keeping score at home, I was looking at the show map. There's no mention of Aslan or Turkish Delight. This is even better than Narnia, so we're good.
Just had to do it.
I had to.
Okay, so the Hebrew title is Diberei Hayamim, and it means the words concerning the days. The words concerning the days. And so, the words concerning what days? Why is that the title? It's an interesting title, right?
Yep.
Well, it's the words concerning the days of Samuel and Kings, when Israel was able to worship, had a temple, right? When they were a nation doing their things, or was it the words that spurred them on through the days of captivity, or was it the words that were given after they came back from captivity, or is it all three?
All three.
Basically, right?
All three.
So the Hebrew title has a lot of depth to it in general, right? So that I think though highlights the difference between Hebraic thought and the modern mind. Like, we'll just make a book a title, right? It's the days, but their titles have just the way of thinking has a lot more first, second, and third order of understanding kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, so Deber Hayamim, and then the title assigned by the Septuagint is the Paraleopomena, and that means the things omitted. Very different thought process there, right? So things omitted from what? These were Jewish scribes that translated the 70 scholars, the Septuagint, from Hebrew to Greek.
Right.
So why did they say the things omitted?
It goes from the official records of the kingdom. That's what it was omitted from.
Yeah, when they were in captivity, they needed to relearn who they were. Israel was in captivity to Babylon for 70 years.
Right.
And they were released by the king of Persia, Cyrus. So the things that were omitted from daily life, the things that were omitted from practice, right? There's no more temple Judaism. The things that were omitted from teaching their children daily in and out, the things that were omitted from the people for, about 2 generations.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
We know from history of even other other people groups, that's long enough to lose
Right.
an identity and to have it necessary for it to be reestablished through Chronicles.
Well, the fact that it got reestablished is an absolutely astonishing reality.
Right.
I mean, how many nations have been utterly wiped out, taken into captivity, and retained their individual nationalistic identity?
Even if we had something that was sort of similar, it wasn't to that degree, and the recovery was not as good.
Right.
There are precious few, if any, nations that have survived something like that.
Right.
So, the fact that Israel came back, and they've got these really thoughtful titles, the words concerning the days, and then the things omitted. And so, in the idea of the things omitted is a much later title as well. The Septuagint
Right.
is hundreds of years
Oh
later.
yeah.
So by then the thought process had shifted as well.
Yeah. And that's why this podcast is actually very, very important, because we are going to discuss the process by which Israel had not only changed and become different, but how they had really morphed
Right.
over millennia up until this
Oh, yeah.
time. So, the Book of Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles in our vernacular, the way we talk about it, but just one book, the Book of Chronicles. Its date is really about 425 BC.
Right.
Okay, so this is just before there was no more word from the Lord at all for Israel, which is another reason why it's the capstone of the Hebraic Tanakh. This was the last words that was given to the people before what we call the New Testament, right? The New Covenant. So here's the thing. It does 1st and 2nd Kings and Samuel, kind of tells the stories, right? It takes you all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's got all the flavor of the covenant framework in it, right? But it also really complicates things, because the book becomes about, so let's go to just the key verses, okay? So, 1st Chronicles 28:20. Nick, read that one there. It's just below purpose.
Okay. 1 Chronicles 28:20 says, Then David said to his son Solomon, Be strong and courageous and act. Do not fear nor be dismayed, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you nor forsake you until all the work for the service of the house of the Lord is finished.
Okay, so suddenly we're reaching back in time, and we're talking about what David said to Solomon. The Lord, my God, is with you.
Right.
So the focus is, God is going to give to you again a Davidic kingdom. Right? Solomon was the capstone of the height of Israel was Solomon.
Oh
The
yeah.
good old
Right?
days.
The good old days.
Yes.
Yeah, when they were so prosperous, he could talk about love and study animals, and write proverbs and wisdom.
He didn't have to worry where his next meal was coming from,
Not at all.
or who was going to invade him.
Yeah, or war. All right, what's the key verse for Chronicles 2? It would be 7:14. 2nd Chronicles 7:14.
2nd Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray, and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin and will heal their land.
Strikes a totally different tone.
Yes.
It's about obedience, isn't it? Right? Do you hear it? So, David said, God is with you. My people, now you're coming back. Build the temple. You will have your Davidic king if you listen and do what I say. Right? So, what we have here is a marked directional focus for the nation. You have here, okay, so let's talk Judaism for just a moment. Temple Judaism died when the temple was destroyed, right? During the first destruction of the temple. Now they're going to build the second temple. But rabbinic Judaism began to live at this time. This is when the traditions that you call rabbinic Judaism today really began.
Right.
You have Babylonian sophir, writers, scribes, right? Who had a very particular job. Not that the sophir or the scribes, right? Not that they didn't have a job prior, because you would faithfully copy, kind of modify to make present the stories, right? You would take oral traditions and write them down. The scribes did that. They did that in the kingly court. They did it before this time. But during the Babylonian captivity, scholarship really became a central focus for Israel. And also, national identity. How do you survive being taken into captivity? A nation? You harden yourself to continue to be that nation, no matter what. Your national identity becomes very, very important to you. Otherwise, you would never survive. There was zero reason they did not become Babylon, except for Jewish people were going to remain Jewish.
Right.
So, nationalism and scholarship. Right? The Babylonian Talmud, right? So even the thing that wasn't completed until 400 AD started during this time. Rabbinic Judaism. And it's very important to note that the tradition began to change. The mode of practice for Judaism began to be different. It now tied in with Temple Judaism. Right? So if those who are called by name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, will forgive them, and will heal their land. So that's the call. Go back, build the temple. Go back, be faithful. Go back and find your Davidic king. Right? Now let's go way back in time. So you have Abraham, who came from Mesopotamia, who brought with him worship at the oaks, etc., and on and on, right? And so we're not going to see that in this book, but the next book that we talk about, in Zechariah, you are going to see a bunch of prophetic restoration of that, right? The angel of the Lord is going to be among the trees, and there's a bunch of stuff, okay? So you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The seeds were sown during that time for division, for breakdown, for destruction, because Abraham had Ishmael and Isaac, two contending individuals. Isaac had Esau and Jacob, two contending individuals, right? Now they're cousins. All these people stayed in the same area. During Isaac's time, you started to have conflict at Shechem and among the people of the Canaanites. With Jacob, you had really bad problems where when Dinah was violated, right? Then they went and tricked him and killed a bunch of them. And then so it's important to note that during this time, Abraham went previously and he conquered a bunch of Canaanite kings. Remember the story when he met Melchizedek and this whole thing, okay? So during Abraham's time, you have this like oddly concurrent priestly system with him, right? And then you have his worship and his values, which were not Temple Judaism, not rabbinic Judaism, right? But you also have an Abraham who was a mighty warrior, and a household that was capable of conquering mighty warriors. Now that trickled down and through, and Jacob's sons became mighty warriors. But so were Ishmael and Esau, right? And they contended with the people. But to the point where this area, so it's called the Levant, where they were, it was loosely organized sort of city-states that never really came together. But each had a form of worship that was oddly similar. If you look at the Baal cycles, you find that their priestly system very similar to Israel. Baal means Lord. Adonai means Lord. Baal Peor, the Lord of Peor,
Right.
right? The Lord of Bethel, the house of God, Adonai of, right? So they have these locations where worship was centralized, including Shechem, where Israel committed apostasy.
Right.
They worship Baal there, right? So, and that's the northern Israel part. So you start to see all this stuff is shaping up at that point, right? Then the people come back from Egypt and they go back into the land, right? So they go, they're not really a people, then they come out, they get a law, they get a tabernacle. The tabernacle is not the belief system of Abram.
No.
Right.
It's not temple Judaism either, right?
Right.
So it's odd, but it leads to the temple, right? But it's not the belief of Moses either, because Moses worshipped on a mountaintop.
Right.
Right.
And Moses was allowed to meet God face to face until the tabernacle was completed. And when the Shekinah came onto the tabernacle, Moses could not go in anymore.
Right.
Instead, it was the priests, right?
Right.
It's change, right? So now the people, they wander, they're destroyed, they go through a whole process of humbling and becoming other,
Right.
and no matter what they've done, they just can't get it quite right?
Right.
So they cross over into the land of Canaan, they're somewhat successful, but they don't do
Right.
everything, and the seeds are already sown for the northern 10 tribes and the southern 2 tribes to split ways.
Right.
And you see it already because the northern tribes, they go across and some of them don't want to send help during
Right.
times of battle and stuff, right? They hadn't quite coalesced as a nation.
Right.
But under David, they became a united monarchy
Right.
after Saul. But how did they get Saul? They rejected God as king,
Right.
Right.
right? Then they got Saul. And then they got David, who God chose. But David made
Right.
a whole series of mistakes,
Oh yeah.
right? Now, David couldn't build the temple because he had blood on his hands.
Right.
But Solomon could. And then what did Solomon do? He got chariots, horses, foreign
Right.
wives, foreign gods. It went all haywire, right?
Right.
So far, we see Abraham making a baby that he shouldn't have,
Right.
right? We see Isaac going through the turmoil of what he went through with his wife and Jacob and all that kind of thing. Isaac was actually quite calm for most of his life. He's kind of nonchalant. He's got actually a smaller part,
Yeah.
You know?
compared
Yeah.
to his father and son.
less drama,
Yeah, less
right?
drama, yeah.
But his son Esau, not so much, right?
Jacob.
Yeah, big
Right.
problems.
Big problems.
And so you have like this, you have all this seed that's gone through and has created the story of the brokenness that follows.
Right.
And it's not by the might of man that God is using men. Instead, it's despite their breaking the law,
Right.
despite their not telling the truth, despite their brokenness, all through the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get to Jacob, all the brothers turn against the one brother who we knew had the Spirit. They turn against
Right.
him. The mighty men of Jacob turn
Right.
against the one we know had the Spirit. They
Right.
sell him into slavery for 20 shekels of silver. They send him down to Egypt. He becomes their Lord and rules over them. That is not temple Judaism, right? Odd. Moses didn't worship the way that temple Judaism or rabbinic Judaism. See, there's this play that's happening all through these processes, right? So now we finally get to Israel has taken the land. They're united under Solomon. Solomon makes all these mistakes. The temple itself is beautiful. It's full of grandeur,
Right.
great renown. But immediately after Solomon, split down the middle, northern
Right.
10 tribes, southern 2 tribes, right? The northern 10 tribes kind of go their own way. They don't care about the temple anymore. They set up high places. They basically become Canaanite,
Right.
but with a twist, right? They have their own version. They have a Joseph Messiah who must suffer and die. And that comes to play a little bit. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, right? Then you have the southern 2 tribes where they have the temple. They're not acting right. They're not doing right. They're not celebrating Passover. They're not doing anything. You get Josiah, who finds a scroll, an ancient scroll that has the instructions on it, and he tries to teach the people to change, but it's too late. The northern 10 tribes get wiped out by the Assyrians.
Right.
The Assyrians get wiped out by the Babylonians. The Babylonians wiped out the southern 10 tribes. Everybody goes into captivity. The northern 10 tribes are scattered all throughout the earth. The southern 2 tribes, however, have a better space with God. They're kept together in Babylon, where the best and brightest are given amazing teaching, right? So
we talked about that with Daniel.
Yes, yeah, Daniel, right, the scribes, right? Daniel's Belteshazzar. Belteshazzar probably had a lot to do with why the Magi came later, you know. So all these things, right? There's this whole crescendoing history. But the point is it's not good or correct or true to say that Israel has always had a specific way of worship or belief, because it has been continuously changing throughout this time. And by the time we get to Chronicles, we see a pretty drastic change. We see the birth of rabbinic Judaism, and we see the restoration of a form of temple Judaism, right? And so that's what the Chronicles books are all about. It's about a nation coming back on an extreme high, believing that God has done everything and anything for them, that they're going to be restored, that they're going to find the Davidic Messiah who's going to rule from Jerusalem. But there's still other belief systems that are not included in Chronicles. So in Chronicles, David is very cleanly presented, right? In Chronicles, the southern tribes version of the future is very cleanly presented, right? And it's just very important to realize this, because the Judaism that they returned to was not the Judaism that they had prior, right? So that's what Chronicles about. It's super important to note that for a lot of reasons. It's the development not only of a belief system, but it's the development of future conflict. So, okay. How do you want to read Chronicles? You want to read it like it's been a few generations since your forefathers have returned to the promised land, but you've not seen many of the promises fulfilled. They came back to Israel in great distress. The surrounding peoples did not want them to build that temple, and they didn't want to welcome them back either. So you want to see the greatness of the kingdom and the glory of the Lord return to the nation. You read this so that you might understand the history of your people, albeit a history that is engineered for a direction.
Right.
It's engineered. So, and here's what it is: obedience to our direction. If you do what we say, then you will be blessed. But again, it's not the same Judaism. It's different. So you want to know what it is that made the kingdom great and what it is that sent the people into captivity, which is the point of this book. It's to recalibrate. It's sort of like another Genesis Exodus, right? It's another teaching moment. It's another changing moment. You're not Babylonian. So Genesis Exodus said, you're not Egyptian, right? This is who you are. This is where we're going. Go take the land. This is, you're not Babylonian. Go back and take the land. It's this replaying motif that continues to happen, where the people become a new people, but not a perfected people. So, you want to know what made it great? The nation has to be established on the basis of God's word so that the kingdom might expand as it did under King David and King Solomon. It's the Josiah thing, right? You want to learn the principles. You want to understand what forces split the nation.
Right.
What sins forced it into captivity. Right. You hope to see in the history of the people the mercy of God preserving, purifying, and embracing his people. Right. Now, since we don't have Maccabees in our Bible collection, we might as well talk about it now.
Yeah.
We're eventually going to get there, but we might as well talk about it now. Because really the culmination of this wish happened with Judah Maccabees. Right. So the Ptolemaic Empire resulted from the conquest of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great swept through, wiped out Israel again.
And everybody else, too.
And everybody else, right?
He was good at what he did.
He was
very good at what he did. The Seleucids were brutal rulers. Because after Alexander died, it was split in 4 pieces, right? Right. And they got Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus, God with us. And he not only defiled the temple, he was absolutely brutal to the people. Right. And so Israel did not see the fulfillment of this. In fact, it was much, much worse than they could imagine. Right. But Judah Maccabees, a Judahite, the Lion of Judah, he was seen as a Messiah. He was able to conquer the Seleucids and overcome it. And for 70 years, they were free. Mm-hmm. The temple was rededicated, right? And that's how we get Hanukkah, right? The one day of light that burned for 7, right? Was a miracle. God was with them and he was for them, but not by the might of men, right. Do you find. So it's quite interesting, this whole dynamic, the whole cycle that runs through, because so for instance, it was Cyrus that let the people go back, and we won't necessarily talk about this again, so we might as well touch on this a bit too. So Cyrus is seen as a anointed figure, right? God gave him the ability, the strength, the desire to allow Israel to go back and build the temple, to go back to their homeland. But he did it for not just Israel. Right. And in whose name did he do it? Was it the Lord our God, Yahweh? No. The Cyrus cylinder says by Marduk. Yes. Yep. And so it's an odd thing to wrestle with God. Because the more you look at these books, the more you read these books. So, secret societies claim to have some knowledge, right? And that, you can become better and greater and you can learn the secrets. Yeah. Well, I hate to tell them.
For $19.99 a month.
or for your soul,
Yeah, right.
If you're going to go worship every god, the great united, whatever, right? So, but the thing is, and this is for you Masons and stuff out there, right? The greater knowledge that is the Bible is not found in uniting it with other ideas and other spirits and other things, or some hidden knowledge that somebody greater than you, some 32nd Mason or whatever you want to believe. It's not in finding some obscure thing that's not there. What it is meditating on these things and spending a lifetime studying them. Because what you find out is that you really have to wrestle with not only who you are, but who God is throughout history. Before Abraham was, I am. That's what Jesus said. There was a God before Abraham was born. And he was working in the world under what name? And how? And with who? And what did it look like? And how did they worship? What is Melchizedek? What is the order of Melchizedek? Who are Shem, Ham, Japheth, right? What did they believe? How did they worship? Why did Jethro appear to teach and lead Moses to the point where he met the God of Jethro, maybe?
I don't know about you, but I'm hoping he's not trying to answer these questions tonight because I don't know the answers.
But see, that's the wonderful thing about this, and this is why we're doing this in Chronicles right now, because Chronicles really is a pivotal moment. This is early for us to talk about, but appropriate, because the prophets that follow lead us somewhere, right? And where they lead us to is the dead end that's Chronicles.
Right.
So the question is how do we wrestle with God throughout history? Who has the truth? The person who meditates on the word day and night, who earnestly seeks the Lord his God with all he is, with all of his might, and loves his neighbor as himself. That's the person that has the truth. And finding that truth is not found in knowledge. It's found in a spiritual awakening.
Right.
It's found in being changed. It is true enlightenment. But it takes a lifetime of going through these books, because you have to wrestle with very challenging things. You have to make peace with how God operated in the world. You have to make peace with who you are with how God operated in the world. You have to make peace with how everybody around you acts and replays everything that you've learned about everybody did repeatedly, and the fact that you do it too. And so how do we wrestle with that and come to peace with the fact that I don't know if I understand him completely?
And I know a lot of things that probably aren't true.
Yeah. And I know a lot of things in me that need to die.
Yeah.
And I don't know what is truly right practice, but I know I'm going to try everything I can to be pleasing to the Lord my God. I don't want to practice rabbinic Judaism.
No.
I can't practice temple Judaism.
Right.
I don't know what Abraham believed. I don't know what Melchizedek practiced.
Right.
The only thing I know is that I can read through these documents and I can see that all these people made really bad mistakes, and I can go, well, what's the solution?
Right.
And that's where the Old Testament ends. What's the solution? And so Chronicles, we needed to do this so that when we get to the next prophets,
Right.
we can really start to be illuminated
Yeah.
by the minimal contents that
Right.
we're going to talk about this time around.
Right.
Yeah.
But by the time we get to the Brit Charsha, or the New Testament version, we're going to have a little more insight than we had by discussing Chronicles in this way.
Right.
So that was an important part that I thought we just really had to labor this time.
Right.
Time well spent, Roger.
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed yourself. We've certainly enjoyed talking, not only with one another, but with you as the listener. We value you. We're so thankful that you're willing to turn this on and listen to us. And we just hope that you're growing, learning, and we hope that you would open your mind. We hope that you would open yourself to the God of heaven and earth. If you were so inclined, you could say right now, Lord, I want to know you. I want to know who you are, and I want to glorify your Son. Call out in the name of Jesus, the Messiah, Jesus the Christ, Jesus the King of heaven and earth. And know this, it's as simple as this. All through the Bible, this you can count on. The Creator of heaven and earth gave kingship to his Son. And that's the moral of the story. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.